Before we get on with the meat and potatoes of today's show, have you ever noticed that when you're flying into ArcCorp and you're taking the tram into Area 18, apart from, the lovely little transit station, there's this roadway between, the landing pads in Area 18. Of course, it's only used to show these assets flying back and forth, but I wonder if maybe someone had thought to use this in concert with the elevators in our hangar bays, if maybe we couldn't bridge those two features and maybe add some interesting gameplay feature to these planets. That would be a really great thing, but, who am I, right? What do I know? Armistice zones, should they exist in Star Citizen? No, they shouldn't. No, they should not. Now, of course, there's a lot of people who are going to say, well, you're a pirate, and I know what you're up to. You miscreants are just going to look for another way to grief us, the good Star Citizen players. And no, what I would like is a more realistic system. Now, what Todd Pappy described recently is something that very much interested me. And, having to do with the whole law, crime, and punishment system, do I think that players should be able to just, pull out endless ships and just keep ramming into landing pads or, going into Area 18 and just drawing a gun and gunning people down? No, I do not. And there should obviously be very severe reputation and criminal penalties for people who do things like that. To the point where, let's say, if you were to crash into a landing pad or anything like that and kill another player, I think that there should be a punishment system where maybe even ArcCorp security forces that orbit the planet might even shoot you on sight before you even get down to the planet. But along with that, we have to understand that sometimes there can be difficulties in trying to land a ship, and that's why I feel that the auto landing feature should be expanded, and that you should enter into kind of like a landing formation where all of a sudden the automated controls take control of your ship and they move you in and land you in at regulated landing areas. Now, if there's other areas of ArcCorp that are unregulated, then perhaps you get to fly in manually to those zones, though you may not enjoy the same protections that you would enjoy in a much more regulated zone. Every area has its reputations. Every area has its own law and order, expectations, as far as player behavior goes. And you have to, you live and die by those reputations. In certain areas, you may not want to screw up your reputation. And in other areas, you may say, I'm only coming here once to take one person out, so I really don't care. And that's kind of how I think it should be. Now, should we be able to smuggle, say, a weapon into Area 18 if there's a high value target that we have to take out there? Possibly, but we also have to be ready and willing to face the penalties for that. We may never be allowed into Area 18 again, or not for a long, long time, or not without some kind of very expansive and time-consuming quest or mission that the player has to go through to get to the point where the security services may not shoot you on sight, but are more likely to ignore you in the future. Things like that. There should be a cost to criminal behavior, and that's something that I believe in fully. I think that there's room in the Star Citizen universe for the purebred criminals, the purebred law-abiders, and those kind of chaotic good individuals who live in between. And that should be one of the ways where, if you're a purebred criminal in the Star Citizen universe, maybe there's certain things over in the lawful good area of the Star Citizen universe that you may want access to, but you can't get access to. But there are those people that are the in-between that don't hold the negative reputations everywhere they go, that can go and purchase those things and then bring those things to you for an appropriate level of profit. I think that kind of creates a much richer economy and a much richer sense of immersion in the game, making sure that people realize that your choices matter, and behaving in a ridiculous manner is something that's going to reduce the amount of choices that you have in the Star Citizen universe. It also means that if you choose to behave on the criminal sides, you may want to be very, very careful about where and when you apply your criminal behaviors. And that's entirely something that I am in favor of. That's kind of the universe that I would like it to be. I feel that the universe, like the Star Citizen universe, should really exist in a much more free-form way, based on these systems of law and crime and punishment that CIG is talking about establishing. I think that as players behave in much more negative ways, certainly much more visible negative ways without being smart about it, that they should be moved off towards much more fringe areas of the galaxy where it's easier for them to operate. It should be kind of a natural process that pushes them out towards those fringe elements. I don't think that it should be something that, strictly speaking, it's sort of like, oh, if you choose law-abiding side, you spawn here. If you choose, criminal side, then you spawn over there. It shouldn't be like a red versus blue, alliance versus horde type thing where you pick a side and then you go there. It should be much more organic in how it develops. I think that creates a much more realistic universe. Certain areas that aren't as well maintained or aren't as well cared for, generally the criminal element tends to gravitate there, whereas areas that are much better maintained, that have maybe, higher taxes or whatever, they have much more security enforcement, and therefore it's a much more difficult area for a criminal element to operate within. I'm never going to be somebody who's in favor of just a PvE or a PvP server. I think that those lines should draw themselves out naturally as the game evolves, and so some people will say this is the safer area, this is the more dangerous area. I think that, for someone who's, let's say, operating as a criminal in the Star Citizen universe, areas that are considered safe areas, areas that are considered kind of, law-abiding areas, should be areas where it would be as dangerous for you to operate in as it would be for a law-abiding player to operate in the more fringe areas. So you would very much be out of your element and running a continuous risk when you're operating in those areas, and perhaps like the more you operate, the more that risk escalates until you just have to leave. And I don't think that that's entirely something that should be down to simply player enforcement in terms of, let's say, bounty hunters or whatnot, but it should also be, R-Corp security, Crusader security, whoever, governs that system. They should eventually start being able to kind of work out where you are and where you're operating, and they should slowly be able to hunt you down. And the more that you do in that area, the faster they find you when you log in, the faster they track you down. And so it should be something like that, whereas if you're gone from an area for a very long time, then they start to relax and they're not really looking for you so much anymore. You're not as much of a priority in that system as, say, another player might be. So you may not receive the attention after a certain amount of time that your criminal behavior in the past merited. Let me give you an example of, how I feel it should work out using the classic shut the satellite off mission, shut down the security satellite so no one sees what's about to happen in an area. This is something that's been in the game since 2.0, right? This is something that we've all messed around with and had a lot of fun with. Now, in the current iteration of the game, you can go in, you switch the satellite off, you're immediately caught, and you get like 5-star crime stat rating right away. But I think that in the future, what it should be is, you can take a mission for, let's say, 10,000 credits, and you can go and you can flip that switch, but if you keep flipping those switches, eventually the law is going to catch up with you. They're going to nail you down. The more you do it, the more they're going to catch up to you. However, I feel that if you're a smart criminal, let's say you're out flying around doing this in a Herald, if you're a smart criminal, maybe you go find someone with the 9 tails and you scan their Herald, you scan their ship, and you duplicate their identity. You then apply that to your ship, and you use whatever methods that could end up in the game to allow you to kind of more or less look like them for a temporary period of time. Then you go and you complete that mission, but you don't pay the cost for that thing because it looks like it was actually someone else who did it. So as you evolve as a player, as you complete more and more of these missions successfully, even though you're incurring greater cost up front, in terms of maybe money and time to kind of pull that off, you gain a certain reputation with criminal factions which allow you to command a higher price. You're no longer viewed as a disposable tool within the criminal underground of, let's say, the Stanton system. You're recognized for your skill set, for your professionalism, for your ability to get things done and to do so in a very quiet and professional manner. And so the forces, or the criminal forces around Stanton, recognize that skill set and pay you an increased amount of money for your services. And I think that that's kind of how things should scale in terms of reputation. There's a cost to being stupid and going out and getting caught, but there's a benefit, a very real material benefit to a player who's smart about how they do things in the Star Citizen universe, who doesn't just sit there and say, oh, well, I'm just going to shoot this whole place up and then fly out of there, boom, done, mission finished. No, there's going to be the player who goes out and says, you know what, I'm going to do this in a really sneaky way. I'm going to do this in a very careful way, a very methodical way. And you know what? I'm going to receive greater rewards because of that. Now for PvP, I think there should be a lot of similar mechanics in how your crimes are processed by the game's law and order system. And I think that it should be a system where if you're attacking other players, the local security forces should zone in on you that much quicker. Like they should be able to get, to the point where they're finding you very, very quickly, a hell of a lot faster if you're going out and attacking other players. I just think that that's the way it should be. If, let's say, you're just being kind of dumb about things and you go out and you're just shooting up all kinds of other players, then very quickly the local security services are going to figure out where you are, what you're doing, and they're going to hound you pretty brutally. Whereas if you're a very smart player and you're at least making sure that no one escapes from you, so there's no visual record of what you're doing, and maybe you're going around duplicating the identities of, the Nine Tails or whoever, then you should be able to get away with that for a little while longer. But any little slip up, anybody escapes from you and returns to base, docks their ship, and they leave that visual record behind of what you've done, then legally speaking, well, not legally speaking, but there should be these records of what you've done in the game in terms of criminality, and that should obviously create a much more severe response from the local security agencies. I think it creates a system where if you're going to the point of just harassing all the new players as much as possible, or you're harassing just regular players as much as possible, it creates a system whereby, in the end, it's actually the NPC kind of law enforcement folks that end up kind of griefing you and chasing you around within the game and making life very difficult for you. Whereas if you're a very careful criminal and you're a very, kind of professional criminal, you can stave off or possibly even eliminate that worry as long as you're being very sharp and very smart about how you apply that. And so, once again, this would be something that you can't go around doing every day. This is something that you would have to be very, very careful about. You can't just go out there and just be shooting up people all over the place, because eventually you're going to get busted. And perhaps players can go out there with much more sophisticated sensor systems that could, nullify your little game where you're duplicating someone else's identity, and thereby eliminate any potential, advantage you may glean from that, allowing the local law enforcement forces to very quickly figure out who you are and once again begin the process of eliminating you from that system. When I hear people, kind of cry out for, we want a PvE server and, a server that's not all PvP, I disagree. I think that if you build the game right, if you build a very robust law enforcement system into the game with realistic penalties and realistic problems that a criminal player would have to face, then what you're going to do is a lot of this so-called griefing that you see in the game is going to be eliminated through just the Darwinian nature of that system. You're going to eliminate and quickly expel a lot of those, stupider criminal elements from the game. Whereas the smarter, the more intelligent criminals are probably going to be able to exist in that ecosystem a hell of a lot longer and may benefit from, being much more tactful in how they commit crimes in the Star Citizen universe. But that's my opinion. That's my perspective on it. I'd love to hear what you think. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.